Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my thoughts on the Bill and Ted cartoon. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. Now, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures is a cartoon series that premiered back in, I believe, 1990. And it lasted for 2 seasons. And what's fascinating about this show is that each season is completely different than the last, other than the fact that it shares the same name and maybe the same style of animation for some characters in the overall show. Other than that, the differences are immense, from the voice cast, which is completely different from one season to the next, to the writing, to the production studio that wound up producing and creating the animation for the episodes. It's one of those things where you honestly will have to wonder why there was even a second season, especially the way that it ultimately wound up being, because it's very rare that you wind up having a show of any kind that lasts for a couple seasons that winds up having a second season that's so dramatically different in terms of quality in numerous different possible ways. Now, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures is not a great cartoon. It's not one of the best animated shows of its time. It's not even one of the best animated adaptations of a film franchise that I can think of. But at least the first season, it's decent enough. It's a time waster for me. It's not something that I would watch over and over again, but it was worth watching. Unlike the second season, which is an absolute train wreck and is bogus and heinous in every sense of the word. I mean, even the intro sucks, and the theme song is terrible, and I'll get to that second season soon enough. But the first season, it actually showed some promise. The first season was produced by Hanna-Barbera. That name might sound familiar to you. They worked on a lot of classic cartoons, including the Flintstones and so on and so forth. And they were coming up on their 30-year anniversary by the time they wound up releasing and producing this particular cartoon. Now, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures was kickstarted and was put on the fast track for production because Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was such a surprise hit in 1989. And Hanna-Barbera thought, hey, Bill and Ted is hot. Let's do a cartoon. I mean, this is the 80s we're talking about. This is technically 1990, but this is so early in the 90s that we're still dealing with the 80s. Let's be perfectly honest here. So, in the 80s, you had a lot of cartoons that were based on popular films. Rambo, The Force of Freedom, RoboCop, and so on. So it's not really that much of a stretch to have Bill and Ted be in a cartoon. And what really lent a lot of credibility to this particular adaptation, at least the first season by Hanna-Barbera, is that you had so many people who were a part of the success of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure involved with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, the cartoon series. What I mean by that is you had Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, who voiced the animated versions of themselves. And on top of that, George Carlin voiced Rufus. And then you also had Bernie Casey, who had a cameo as Mr. Ryan in one of the episodes. And on top of that, an incredibly talented voice cast. I mean, you got, I think it was Joe Alasky, Kathy Soucie. She lent some voiceover work to this particular show. You also had Phil Hartman, the legendary late Phil Hartman, who did some voices for this cartoon. And then the animation, I honestly thought was pretty impressive at times, especially from when it comes to Hanna-Barbera. In particular, the backgrounds. There are a lot of episodes in this first season that are really impressive visually when it comes to the backgrounds and the backdrops of a particular episode. And they actually paid so much attention to detail that there are episodes that take place in a particular time period. Like, for example, there was an episode where Bill and Ted go to the Renaissance to meet up with Leonardo da Vinci and get his help with something. And in this particular episode, in the background of the Leonardo da Vinci sequences, the art style is heavily inspired by Da Vinci's own art style. And I thought that was such a really cool touch. And that really showed that the animators at Hanna-Barbera with this particular show, they really did make the attempt to go the extra mile when it comes to really providing a high quality overall product, despite the fact that, it was a show that was produced in a lot of ways just to sell some toys and to sell some cereal, like a lot of cartoons back in that particular time period. But where this show really kind of falters, and where this show ultimately doesn't really live up to its full potential, considering everybody that's involved and considering the high quality of the production for at least the time period and for the kind of show that it is the writing. It's not particularly that funny in terms of the humor. It's not consistently engaging when it comes to the stories. It gets fairly predictable as you keep going on with each episode. There's some questionable decisions with the writing and the jokes. For some reason, they do this repeated series of gags where you'll have somebody from a particular time period, like young Mozart or so on and so forth, that'll make a reference to like a 90s bit of technology or something from that particular modern time period from when this show aired. They make a reference to that, and it would just fall flat and make no sense. You're just like, why? Even for a cartoon for kids, you're like, why are they talking about uh, stuff from 1990? Why would they have any idea what a fucking rollerblade is? It's like one of those things. It's like these things didn't exist back then. Where is the context for this? And then they would also have weird things where, for some reason, you'd have voiceovers by particular characters, side characters, that would sound like they're from New York or some other place in America, or another nationality entirely different than the one that they're supposed to be portraying in the episode. So that was kind of like, what? And they also did this thing that I did not like, where they kept shoehorning Bill and Ted into actual history, where Bill and Ted would be responsible for inspiring the American Revolution. You're just like, we don't really need to go that far. That's not necessary. Bill and Ted are cool enough. We don't need to have them be like the lost members of the founding fathers. And speaking of the historical stuff, it really doesn't do that good of a job teaching you anything. And I think that's definitely a missed opportunity as well. I mean, yes, it could have become boring in that way, but you can do that in a way that isn't boring. Look at something like the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego cartoon for reference. But they really just skirted around the historical stuff. Like, they just mention it, and sometimes they get stuff wrong, or they deliberately twist things around so they could fit it into a particular story. That being said, there are some moments with the writing that is really clever. There's some meta references to George Carlin's comedy career from Rufus in an episode where he's in a record shop and uh, looks at a record of George Carlin on stage doing comedy, and I thought that was really clever. There are references to particular lines of dialogue or moments in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, so that also helps add some authenticity to this particular cartoon. There were some episodes that actually had surprise guests. For example, Little Richard actually voiced himself in a particular episode. But despite its every now and then success, it just is not consistently funny or engaging or really spirited enough as a cartoon to really maintain your interest for more than maybe a few episodes. Once the novelty factor of hearing Keanu, Alex, and Carlin voicing their characters in animated form wears off, then you're left with just a pretty meh cartoon. And definitely a relic of its time. There are some episodes too that have some humor that's really questionable, but nowhere near as questionable as some of the humor in the second season. But before I get on to talking about season 2, I have to give mad props and mad praise to the lyricists and the composers for the film. I mean, the show. It's based on a film, so forgive me. And I'm always in film mode for the cartoon's theme song. It's a really catchy and fun theme song. The intro really does a great job getting you wanting to watch the show. I wish that the show was as fun and as memorable as the theme song was, but at the end of the day, I've seen worse Bill and Ted adaptations, season 2 or Face the Music, but I've also seen better. But I think it's a nice stepping stone for people who aren't super familiar with Bill and Ted, or for kids. And because at its core, at its essence, it really is a cartoon for kids. And I could see kids, and even today, especially if you show them Bill and Ted and they actually enjoy it, I could see them getting some serious enjoyment out of this cartoon. I will say this though, it does take a while to kind of pick up the pace or really deliver when it comes to the overall quality of the episodes. And I think part of that has to do with the voice cast getting chemistry with one another and really becoming more comfortable in their roles, and the writers and everybody involved with the show. Because even though ultimately I just think it's a meh show, there are some good episodes. For one, I really like A Black Knight in San Dimas. Model T for Ted was pretty good. And it seems like as the series got further along in its development, it got better, which is why it's so frustrating to see how bad the second season is. And it's also incredibly frustrating to see that they went in a completely different direction with season 2 than just letting the same people who did season 1 also do season 2. I don't understand the thought process. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, this DVD set, it doesn't include all the episodes from season 1 for some reason. I don't know. It's missing, I think, like 4 or 5 episodes, but includes every single cringy, god awful, pretty much unwatchable episode of season 2. Now, season 2 of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures right from the beginning, it starts off in the worst possible way because you go from Hanna-Barbera, who at the time was not quite at the same level or the same height as they once were, but they were still a much better and much higher quality studio for animation than the studio that did season two. Uh, yes, Hanna Barbera would go on to do embarrassing things like Yo Yogi and those really cringy attempts to try to be hip to the '90s crowd, like the Flintstones kids and all that other stuff. And in comparison to those, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures is like a masterpiece. But that's not saying much. But even Yo Yogi and Flintstone Kids are also masterpieces compared to season 2 of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. And the reason why is because you go from Hanna-Barbera to Deke, or I like to call Dick. Dick Entertainment, because all they do is serve you dick. Animation that sucks dick, production values that suck dick, writing that sucks dick, and even a theme song that sucks dick. Now, I mean, I don't even know why they didn't just keep the same theme song. It's a very catchy theme song. It really does fit the overall vibe and energy of Bill and Ted well. And then season 2, the theme song is generic as all hell, forgettable, and does the worst. I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm sorry. This theme song, it's just so bad that it makes you not want to watch the cartoon. Like, you know you've messed up when you have a cartoon that starts out with this really awkward voiceover by the new actors who were portraying Bill and Ted in this cartoon that just sounds really off. And then you get the theme song, which is generic and lazy. And then you get the animation in the episode itself, which is generic and lazy. You get the writing, which is incredibly awful and bogus and heinous in every possible way, from the jokes, from the storylines. There's a particular episode called The Star Strangled Banner, which is unbelievably mean-spirited in numerous different ways, in ways that are astonishing, and I think would have been pretty offensive and unacceptable even back in 1991. Like the Star Strangled Banner, the whole center of this episode is that Bill and Ted have to go in the phone booth and go back in time and go talk to Francis Scott Key, the guy who wrote the Star Spangled Banner, because they need to find a way to stop Missy from singing the Star Spangled Banner at some baseball game, because if she sings, it's going to ruin relations between America and Japan and set music back 20 years because she sucks so much. And then, if that isn't bad enough, they have so many really absolutely just stunningly tone deaf, Asian stereotype, racist jokes and interpretations in this particular episode. You have this Japanese baseball player who's, it's so difficult to watch. And I know times were different back then, but I still find it hard to believe that this was even acceptable back in 1991. I'm sorry. With this level of just straight up racism, with like the stereotypical Asian stereotypes where the Japanese guy is speaking in the stereotypical accent and bad English and doesn't know how English works and is reading from a how to translate his words into English book, and he's doing a bad job, and that's supposed to be funny because he doesn't know how to speak English and all this other stuff. It's just really, really lowbrow and low. And absolutely not something that Bill and Ted is about as a franchise, or these characters are really, they don't represent this kind of stuff, and they never have in any of the movies or in the animated series before. But that's what happens when you get dick. You not only get animation that sucks dick and all these other things that suck dick, but you also get dicks who are involved with the show when it comes to the stories and when it comes to the characters. They don't even do a good job with the one unique original concept that they have for this particular second season. It's called Squint. It's a new addition to the phone booth, which enables Bill and Ted to go inside of TVs and do all these different things and really think outside the phone booth. But they do nothing with it. They do the lamest shit. Bill and Ted, the first show that they go inside of in this cartoon is a Leave It to Beaver knockoff. How lame is that shit? Bill and Ted go inside Leave It to Beaver? Like, of all the fucking shows, you're gonna have Bill and Ted go inside Leave It to Beaver, and the whole episode is about them trying to, I guess, fix something that's going on in the Leave It to Beaver show. Which is, it's cool. Of course, they can't call it Leave It to Beaver, so it's like, what is it, like Leave It to Cleaver or some shit? I don't remember what it was. I don't care. Leave It to Badger, that's what it is. And then you have another episode where they go inside a Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood knockoff to try to save Mr. Rogers from retiring because kids shows today are too violent and really aren't a good role model for today's kids. I'm just like, God, this cringy, politically correct bullshit. Get this fucking bogus crap out of my face. And with the second season, Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, they do not come back to voice the characters. Neither does George Carlin. So what you get is all three of the same people that would go on to do the live action show on Fox. Because this also aired on Fox, I think, this second season. So you have Christopher Kennedy, you have Evan Richards, and you have Rick Overton. And I thought all three of them did way better jobs in the live action version than they did in the animated version. Especially Evan Richards and Christopher Kennedy. Just overall, just a really lame, boring, unfunny, really hard watch in numerous different ways. I didn't even watch all the episodes on this season because I just couldn't stand it anymore. It was that bad. And then there's this weird thing they like to do in like multiple episodes where Bill and Ted would get in a bad situation and they would have this really annoying sound effect that would play that is like a guitar version of somebody going, "Oh no." It would be like, "Oh no." You're just like, what are you doing? Stop sucking dick. Dick entertainment. Yeah, I definitely do not recommend the second season of this cartoon. I do recommend the first season, though. If you're a fan of Bill and Ted and you haven't really heard of it, or you haven't seen an episode of the cartoon in forever, I do recommend giving it a watch and checking an episode or two out. Like I said, I do recommend Black Knight and Sam Demas. And I think, yeah, it's worth checking out. Not only if you're a fan, but also to see Keanu and Alex and Carlin in animated form. I mean, it is a novelty at the end of the day, but I'm glad that they still did it because there is still something really cool about that. Because how often do you see a film adaptation, I mean, a cartoon adaptation of a film, how often do you see that happen with so many people who portrayed those characters on film, portraying these characters in animation? So that's something you don't see very often. It's pretty rare. So while the show could be better, and while at the end of the day it's just a time waster for me, it's not bad. At least the first season. The second season, it's bad beyond words. It really is. It's one of the crappiest cartoons I can honestly think of that I've seen. It's that bogus. It really is. Anyway, I don't know what else to say about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, except thank you for watching my thoughts on it, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.